Hey there. Well, I just got through watching a program on Nova talking about the chariots of Egypt and how they made them and stuff like that. And I found something pretty interesting here. That I'm looking at this web page here, and it's about the chariots. Just a program I was watching earlier, and it said that here that the let's see here. I'm gonna put my glasses back on so I can see. It says that the spokes of the wheels were made by bending 6 pieces of wood into a V shape. These were glued together in such a way that every spoke was composed of two halves of two V-shaped pieces forming a hexagonal star. The tips of the V's were fastened to the hub by wet cattle intestines, which hardened when they dried. No, thank you, Barnes and Noble. The tires were made of sections of wood tied to the wheel with leather or rawhide lashings, which passed through slots in the tire sections. The thongs did not come into contact with the ground, making the chariots more reliable by reducing the wear and tear. When a chariot was not in use, the constant pressure of its own weight tended to deform the wheels. When the vehicle was stationary for an extended period of time, they were removed. They were therefore removed, as was in the tomb of Tutankhamun, or the chariot could be turned over. German carpenters who reconstructed such a chariot needed about 600 man-hours to complete it. 600 man-hours to complete it. Okay, so check this out. The lack of springs made the chariots unsuited for use in rocky terrain, where they could easily overturn or break, and even at the best of times, shooting arrows, let alone taking proper aim from a speeding chariot, must have been a difficult task. The dude on the show here, he didn't have too hard of a time, but anyway, it was on Nova again. That's what it called. I forgot it. What it was called. The program was called. Therefore, the chariots fought therefore in close ranks, overwhelming the enemy by a quantity of missiles rather than their accuracy. They were all shooting. If the chariot was about to overturn, the crew would try to jump off the open back before it happened. Then, if the chariot was broken, catch the horse and ride him to safety. What chariots were certainly very much suited for was the pursuit of fleeing enemy on an open plain. What chariots were certainly very much suited for was the pursuit of fleeing enemy on an open plain, when spears could be used for stabbing them in the back. What does that remind you of? Okay, let me read this other one here to you real quick. And this is at the time of the Thutmose second or third, and we're talking about the 1490s, 1450s BC, whenever 1490s BC, according to Usher's Annals of the World by Usher, and what mostly you have in all other Bibles time period there. And so that's about Thutmose's time. And of course, Thutmose, Moses kind of go together there. The name Moses, he probably was named for Moses, Thutmose or something. I don't know. Anyway, it says serving in the charioteer corps did not come cheap. Anyway, that doesn't need to be read. I already read some of it. But that's pretty interesting, though, what I read earlier there. Yeah. What chariots were certainly very much suited for was the pursuit of fleeing enemy on an open plain, when spears could be used for stabbing them in the back. So there, I didn't want to read the other part because it didn't really have a whole lot to do with it. There we see a little hint of something, don't we? Now, if we go to Exodus chapter 14, this is what we see here. Let's see here, verse 6. And he said, and he made ready his chariot and took his people with him, and he took 600 chosen chariots and all the chariots of Egypt and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel. See, there you go. And he pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with an high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them, and all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them, encamping by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth before Baal-zephon. And it said, when the Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And they cried out to the Lord. Let's see here. Now, if we go to verse 23, and it says, and the Egyptians pursued and went in after them in the midst of the sea, after Moses and then opened the sea up, Red Sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire, and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily. And took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. Now check this out. Let's go back to what I was reading here. Okay. Says the lack of springs made the chariots unsuited for use in rocky terrain. So they were chasing them on a plain, a flat area. And it said here, it talks about they could have easily overturned. Even at the best time, shooting arrows was pretty hard. Chariots fought, therefore, in close ranks. And the advantage was firing a bunch of arrows at one time, missiles. The crew could try to jump off, and ride the horses to safety. And it says here what chariots were certainly very much suited for was the pursuit of fleeing enemy on an open plain, when spears could be used for stabbing them in the back. Isn't that something? It gives me chill bumps thinking about it. The Egyptians knew two types of chariots: the war chariot, which had 6 spokes, wheels, while the carriage chariots had only 4. So I know Ron Wyatt's had done all this stuff before. When he done all that stuff before he died, it's showing, there's chariots on the bottom of the Red Sea. But the thing about it is, all that water rushing back in, they could just put stuff in smithereens, splintered everything. Not very seriously, there's really a chariot wheel down there, and if there is, then it's pretty fortunate that the Lord chose not to wipe out all those chariots, all 600. So 600 chariots meant they had to be 1,200 wheels. And I doubt very seriously all of them were gold veneered. But anyway, that's something else, I tell you. And about the fact that it couldn't go on rocky terrain because it would flip over because they had no springs. That to me, it shows me right there that evidently they were going across the Sinai Peninsula, the upper part of the Sinai Peninsula, where you had riverbeds. You had this flat land, and then you eventually had riverbeds where they would cut through and go across the Red Sea to Midian. And evidently that was a dry area there whenever the waters were split by Moses. The Lord split the waters, and so there's a lot of sand there. And if those spokes were glued, that they drave them so heavily, it's likely that they melted. The glue melted from the spokes, and the wheels came off because they were driving them so hard in that sand. Then you see there it says, let us flee. Let us get out of here. And verse 23 to 25, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And you see in verse 23, they went in after them in the midst of the sea. They were a long way from land. From the land which was out of the water. So they didn't have enough time to escape. And the Moses closed the Red Sea by God's command, and they were wiped out. But again, it shows us here that they were meant to be driven on flat, plain land, not rugged areas, not mountains, not rocks, what have you. Because just imagine a chariot without springs. Just imagine a chariot that doesn't have any give this way. You know what I mean? Left to right. And it could, the harness on the horses was kind of stiff. It's showing on the TV here. They were kind of stiff, and they would, if whenever it hit like a rock or something other, one part of that harness, the hitch, would bear against one horse, and it would light up on another, and it would kind of pull one horse and push down on another, and they would get all unsettled and get anxious, and they could kick and break the hitch, which they did on one of these, on the show here. But anyway, I'll put this link on here so you can see it for yourself, and it kind of helps show that likely, I'm not saying 100%, but evidently they used glue to put the spokes on. They had 6 spokes and they had 4 spokes. 4 spokes were for chariots, 6 spokes were for the war chariots. And they used cattle guts, intestines to lash it to the hub. And evidently that cattle intestine could have got wore out from the sand, or it could have could have melted. You never know. But it kind of lines up with scripture here. And I just thought I would share it with you. And again, I'll put the link up there for you so you can see it for yourself. And that's Exodus chapter 14. So God bless, take care, and I'll see you next time.